come to the last session of the day, though last but not the least. So, distal third tibia fibula fractures, probably that part being the part of the body which is closest to the ground, we do get a lot of injuries and at times they may be open. Now this was a fracture at the middle third lower third junction, and despite this nailing it has failed to unite even at the end of 2 years. The reasons could be many. Probably there could be you can see all the screws going in the one plane, so that doesn't give you a rotational stability. Second, probably you can see that the nail is undersized, so again that's the issue. There might be subclinical infection which we can't pick up on this X-ray. So is there a better way to manage? So this was a 52-year-old male who had a fracture of the middle third lower third tibia fibula, and this was nailed. Now when it comes to reduction technique in nailing, we have various options. You can do it in a closed way, palpate the sheen of the tibia. You can even use a distractor if there is a comminuted fracture. You can use shank screw on either side and try to manipulate them. A spiral oblique fracture can be held in place with a reduction clamp. You can also do a mini open and put in a small plate, or at times you can use a spike to reduce it. These are the various reduction techniques based on the personality of the fracture that you should be aware about. Now, this was the nail that was used. This is the latest nail from the AOSYS, which is a multi-locking nail. You can see the fracture went on to unite and he had a good functional outcome with a good range of movement both at the ankle as well as the knee. Another case of a lower third tibia fibula fracture. This was nailed. What is important is those multiplanar bolts. They are the one which will give you rotational stability. And again he had a good clinical outcome. Now the latest nail, which is known as tibia nail advanced. So here we have an option of multiplanar locking screws, 4 screws in the disc. This gives a good angular stabilities. The screws are low profile, the bolt which are passed through them. And now we have an option of 5 screw on the proximal part and 4 screws distally. This is the nail which was introduced by AO after the expert tibia nail. Also we have got increased size. Commonly in the Indian scenario we get of size 8, 9, 10 and 11. But with a multinational company we may even have option of 12 and 13. Even the lengths are more, so lot of advantages. So basically this lower third junction, here the blood supply is precarious. So complication and prognosis is at times related to soft tissue injury, which should always be taken into consideration, and probably bypassing this precarious zone by nail at times is useful. But what are the challenges? Is it so easy to do it? No. Probably the medullary space widens as we go distally beyond the isthmus. The fragment can be unstable. Just passing a nail may not help in reducing the fracture, and at times there might be an intra-articular extension. So complications are known when a nailing is attempted even in a lower third tibia fracture. What is important is you need to understand that concept. When you are nailing for a proximal third tibia fracture, the deforming force is the quadriceps, which tends to pull the proximal fragment into extension. Whereas in a lower third tibia fibula, the deforming force is fibula. Fibula tend to translate it usually medially or laterally. So the difference in nailing technique is when you nail for a distal third tibia, where your nail is going to end, that point matters, and that point should be in the center of the tibia, both in the AP and the lateral view in a lower third tibia fracture. Whereas in the proximal third tibia fracture, your starting point is very important, where you start with. So that entry point has to be just medial to the lateral tibial spine. So what are the, even a suprapatellar nailing nowadays has been tried for proximal tibia, proximal third as well as distal third tibia fracture. The advantages being the OT time is less, the blood loss is less, the radiation exposure is also less, the ease of taking a shoot on the C-arm is much easier when it comes to suprapatellar nailing. We'll take you through this case of suprapatellar nailing. I guess the video is not running. Yeah, now it may run. Yeah. So first you need to see what type of fracture it is.
You see he is injecting something into the joint. For suprapatellar nailing, one of the things you can do is inject the joint with fluid so that the patella gets lifted anteriorly, so it is easier for you to reach your entry point, okay, to lift the patella up.
What is important is to have this bolster underneath, which will be just distal to the joint line, mark your patella tendon and the quadriceps tendon, infiltrate the suprapatellar pouch that lifts up the patella from the femur. You can take an incision now directly over the skin, overlying the quadriceps tendon that can be split. And as you split, you try to dock your sleeve at the junction of the anterior surface with the articular surface. That's the anterior surface, that's the articular surface. In an AP view, you should be just medial to the lateral tibial spine. Your starting point is important here. Pass this polar wire. This will prevent your guide wire entering into the posterior cortex. At times, you may even need to pass two wires. Once you have passed this, pass the guide wire distally. Check that it has negotiated through the fracture. Then you can start the reaming. You can see here the guide wire has been docked distally in the central position. Once you have reamed to the desired length, there is the new nail where you have 5 locking options proximally and 4 distally. Once the sleeve is locked, you can pass in this nail and then start locking. Usually we do the distal locking first. You can backhammer the nail, get a compression at the fracture site, and then do a proximal nailing. Once you have done a multiplanar locking, you will get a good rotational stability, and that was the outcome. At 5 months, you can see a good range of movement. And if you see sequential X-rays at 6 weeks, at 2.5 months, at 5 months, probably all the rimmed marrow has helped in consolidating it. Now, what is one advantage of this nail over the other nails is now we can even achieve some degree of compression using a nail. What was the concept with a DCP plate? Now the same thing can be done using a nail. The amount of compression we can get is 7 mm. So that's been beautifully demonstrated by this video from the AO. So once you have reduced the fracture, pass a nail, locked it distally. In the proximal one, just pass a screw through the dynamic hole. And as you pass the screw through the dynamic hole and tighten this, you can see the part moving in. Do I have the marker? You can see as this is the dynamic screw in situ. This is the part provided extra, and as you tighten this, the position of this, because of the position of the screw, the nail, it tends to back out. So that is the amount of compression you are getting at the fracture site. You can see it backing out. So now even with the intramedullary nail, it's now possible to get a compression at the fracture site. Coming to the plating in the lower third of the tibia, usually because of the precarial blood supply, the anteromedial surface of the tibia does not have origin of any muscles, so insertion of any muscles, we most of the times tends to avoid to open it and just slide a plate, which is a biological plating. And if this is executed well, probably even these fractures go on to heal well. This was another case. You can see that the fracture is really low down. When you are suspecting an intra-articular extension, you can also do a CT scan and again plate this fracture. So basically when it comes to middle third, lower third junction fractures, we are very much clear that they should be nailed. However, if it's in the distal third, probably juxta-articular, intra-articular fracture, plating is probably a better option. Coming to the next part of the talk, that's the ankle fracture. So this was a supination external rotation injury, which was treated with this trimalleolar fracture, cotton fracture, which was treated with this fixation of all the three malleolus. So what is the supination external rotation? Are there any other types? So we need to understand the classification system for ankle fractures. The two commonly used classification systems are the Weber's classification and the Logie-Hansen's classification. So Weber's classification probably simpler. A is below the syndesmosis, B is at the level of syndesmosis, and C is above the level of syndesmosis. Now coming to the Logie-Hansen's classification, there are four types. Two with respect to supination and two with respect to pronation. So the first word tells you the position of the foot at the time of injury. Supination of the foot is a combination of three movements. Supination is plantar flexion, adduction and inversion, and opposite for pronation. And the second one tells you the direction of the force at the time of injury. So these are the four injuries patterns possible. Let's see how we can identify them. What is important to remember is injury starts on the tight side of the ankle. So a supination injury, the tight side is the lateral side, and it will start from the lateral side. The pronation injury, the tight side is the medial side, and the injury will start from the medial side. So supination external rotation injury, 50 to 70% of the injuries are supination external rotation injury. This is one injury which you should know, pit pat. So here the injury starts at the anterior talofibular ATFL ligament. It will proceed outwards to the fibula, then move posteriorly to the posterior malleolus, and then come medially either the deltoid ligament or the medial malleolus. That's how it follows. Now important in this is to distinguish between supination external rotation type 2 level 2 injury versus level 4 injury, because level 2 injury is a stable injury which can be treated conservatively, whereas the level 4 injury, where the entire circle the force has completed, there you cannot conserve that injury, that needs a fixation. So how do we distinguish it? If there is an obvious fracture of the medial malleolus, it's not an injury. What if it's a deltoid ligament injury? Then probably if you don't have access to the MRI, it becomes a challenge. So here you can see the medial. So the lateral injury, the classical fracture of the fibula is, it starts from posterior superior to anterior inferior. The medial injury, again if it's a malleolus injury, it's easier to distinguish, whereas if it's a deltoid avulsion injury, what we tend to do is we look for the tenderness on the medial malleolus. That's not true. Swelling at the medial malleolus, ecchymosis, no, even that's not true. So here the important thing is to do a stress X-ray. The stress external rotation AP view is the one which will tell us the opening on the medial side, and accordingly we decide it. So this was one patient with a supination external rotation injury presented to us late. Here what is important is to remove all the fibrous tissue at the fracture site, pressure them, and then go down and fix it. So this was fixed well. The second type of injury is the supination adduction injury. Important to remember here is the medial fracture is vertical. The lateral is transverse fracture. Starts from laterally and goes medially. The third type of injury is the pronation external rotation injury. Here the syndesmosis is involved. So here it will start from the medial side, the deltoid ligament, go anteriorly to the ATFL, then to the fibula spiral fracture, and exit at the posterior malleolus. That's how the force will transverse. When it's a pronation external rotation injury, that's the time you suspect a syndesmotic ligament injury. You should be also knowing what is the Mason's fracture. This is a fracture which occurs at the upper third of the fibula, whereas the medial injury will be at the malleolus. So to diagnose this injury, what is important is to get a long leg X-ray, a full length tibia fibula X-ray. So never miss that. And finally, a pronation adduction injury. How you diagnose it is, here the fibula fracture will be usually a comminuted one. So both the pronation injuries are suprasyndesmotic injuries, type C injuries. So if you try to correlate Weber with the Logie-Hansen, Weber A is supination adduction, type B is supination external rotation, and C type is pronation. A word about syndesmotic injury. They are commonly associated with a pronation external rotation or suprasyndesmotic fracture. What is important is to do a hook test, pull it, and it's just not that you should check it laterally, you should also check it posteriorly, you should also check it anteriorly. Apparently the most commonest hook test positive you will get is when you pull it posteriorly. And if it is an unstable one, you should put the screws, which is usually put 2 to 4 centimeter above the level of the ankle joint. What is not clear in the literature is how many screws should be put, whether you should penetrate both the cortices of the tibia, when should the screw be removed, and should the screw be passed through the plate or out of the plate. The final part of the talk is on the posterior malleolus. Posterior malleolus can either be an isolated injury or it can be a part of the bimalleolar fracture or a trimalleolar fracture. At times you get it even with a shaft fracture. Is there a consensus on the fixation of the posterior malleolus? So if you do a CT based classification, there are 5 types of this, and only the type 1 is to be conserved. All other types, they should be fixed. There are certain radiological signs like the Misty Mountain sign, the double contour sign, which should be appreciated. CT scan is nowadays recommended for posterior malleolus fracture. What is the sequence of fixation? Suppose if you have this type 2B injury, the fracture which is deeper should be fixed first. So you can see here the posteromedial, here the fracture line is going deeper. So this should be fixed first. If you fix first, then you won't be able to fix the deeper fragment. So the sequence of fixation in a posterior malleolus is also important. CT scan has become a kind of a norm. Are there any complications associated with it? Yes, if you keep the plate too prominent, the FHL, that will be at the risk of injury. So complications are also known in a posterior malleolus fixation with a rate being close to 10%. But it's a rewarding thing. Even a posterior malleolus fixation does stabilizes the syndesmosis. So what's the take home? Distal tibia fracture, nailing should be attempted only if there is a sufficient bone stock, and you can, you will get a good hold for the bolts. Slide plate should be attempted if the skin condition is good, especially at the metaphyseal-diphyseal fracture with intraarticular extension. Ankle fracture in a supination external rotation injury, the external rotation stress view is the key. Syndesmosis fixation is indicated in pronation external rotation injury, and when you see a posterior malleolus, do think of doing a CT scan. That was in short about the injuries around the ankle. Any questions?